I do want to get into the NatCons, so I think a good place to start this, and actually one of the things, I don't know, maybe it shouldn't be surprising to me because it's not like there aren't a zillion historical antecedents, but I always find disconcerting about them is that if your worldview is all about nations and the importance of nationhood, and your nation or the people you have something in common with, and you should be trying to advance the interests of your nation at the expense of other nations. I'm very confused by how internationalist all these guys seem to be. That they have that like they all seem to spend so much time hanging out with and expressing solidarity with other nationalists in other places. I don't feel like I completely understand that, but
you're being coy. It's perfectly understandable. It's part and parcel, just like America exported wokeness as a left type of discourse and worldview, which contained in it a fundamental racialization of identity. The right, they say nationalism because they can't say what they really mean. There's a segment of the right. I shouldn't say all NatCons, but that see this traditionalist language as a means of laundering, quite frankly, white supremacy. And there's a recent post by Ron Dreher vigorously disavowing a particular member of that community, podcaster themselves, a Christian classical school teacher, a proper young fogey is the term that is one of the terms that the Harvard rightists like to use for themselves. That was outed as anonymous Twitter racist, anti-Semite, violent conspiracy theorist, because the ones who want to maintain some connection with a civic tradition in the United States and who understand that overt racism is beyond the pale in most Western societies, really potentially toxic for their brand. So you got to get rid of the ones that say that take that final step. And to be fair, I don't think that Ron Dreher is a race first NatCon. He is a Jesus first NatCon.
Yes. Emphatically, yes. Although even there, he is willing to strike some ecumenical alliances. I do want to note two of them. So Ron Dreher, who we're going to be getting much more into as we go on, is somebody who is a fixture at NatCon conferences. He's also, I should say, decamped to a different Nat. He now lives in Hungary
among the brother Magyars.
Exactly, yes. Where he is essentially very close to a right-wing version of a tanky in the original sense. Somebody who's like a Westerner who would get really into an authoritarian, leftist government and go take the trip where you get to ride around in the tank or whatever. But for Viktor Orban's Hungary,
I'd like to say that he's trying to speedrun Ezra Pound. He'll end up at that war crimes tribunal sooner or later.
Fair enough. But again, even though I agree, I mean, he is clearly Jesus first in his orientation. In fact, before he swung to the NatCon stuff, his original thing was the what he called the Benedict option, which is that Christians are just, society's become too decadent and Christians are just going to have to retreat from it instead of trying to change it. And I think now he's back to trying to change it. But, again, I think he sees Orban's government in Hungary as a big inspiration. But somebody just sent, not the Matthew who's going to be on the show later, but a different Matthew who sometimes sends me stuff like this, friend of the show, unironically, sent me this article today since he saw we were going to be talking Rod. It is Kenan Malik in the Guardian, and there is this fascinating quotes about the the World Cup in Qatar and the various criticisms of that like nightmarishly awful regime in Qatar that have been raised in connection to it, having to do with quasi-slave working conditions, having to do with women's rights, the suppression of religious minorities, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And who should pop up to push back against that? But, well, let's read for this. The American Christian conservative Ron Dreher, a cheerleader for Donald Trump, Marie Le Pen, and Viktor Orban, has condemned Western, quote, cultural imperialism, unquote, toward Qatar, excoriating, quote, the disgusting arrogance of Western liberals who treat the diverse peoples of the world as if they were wogs who exist to be humiliated into being civilized, which, man, this got to be Rod at his wokest.
And one of the most irritating elements of NACONs and Ron Dreher in particular, for anyone that has a philosophical bent of mind, is how immediately inconsistent the ideology gets. So on the one hand, he'll do things like defend Qatar or argue that conservative Christians in the United States should be working with conservative Jews, no problem, but also Muslims that have their own anxieties and their own animus towards things like a gender transition or homosexuality and the acceptance of LGBTQ people into the culture fully without shame or humiliation. That's Rod's preferred position. He's not putting anybody on cattle cars yet. He just wants everyone to look at them with disgust until they feel so ashamed of themselves that they'll change their ways. But that solidarity, when he's reaching out beyond his particular form of Christianity, is so obviously cynical, so obviously insincere, right? That it is a tactical move. His preferred type of cultural imperialism is too weak to operate. His particular form of authoritarian intolerance has been enshrined in the institutions. So he'll use the language of multiculturalism. He'll use the language of international tolerance, of solidarity, of multipolarity, just to cover up the fact that he wants to replace one authoritarian international cultural order with another, using the power of states like Hungary or Trumpian America or a integralist nativist France. But there's no freedom that Ron Dreher is even pretending to offer. All he wants to do is replace the kingdom of what he would say is Satan with the kingdom of Christ, where you're not, how did he put it, humiliating wogs into being civilized, but in the good old-fashioned way, taking back the Holy Land with fire and the sword.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the thing to emphasize about these people is they're very, very frank about this sometimes. And you know, as you mentioned, I mean, in this quote, Rod is being pretty disingenuous. I mean, he's sort of, he can express some sympathy for the Qatari despots because they're being they're being victimized by the imperialism of being criticized for having horrible labor conditions and stuff like that he agrees that they should be allowed to have. But he emphatically does not want to have a pluralistic society. You have been watching free public content from Give Them an Argument. To access every single episode of the show, the main show on Monday nights, all of the streams, all of the debate breakdowns, all of the patron-exclusive post-games on Monday nights, all of the patron-exclusive bonus episodes every week, and much, much more, go to patreon.com/Ben Burgis. I cannot resist ending this with, don't be foolish.